In today's world, society has created people to stereotype others and to not think twice. Our past history has created people to judge others and to not move on and to stereotype others just because of what people have done in the past. Hello everybody, my name is Casey Cooper, and we'll be talking about the article, Others People's Daughters, Critical Race Feminism and Black Girls Education. So this article has 3 sections in it, and the ones that I'll be talking about is the first one, Research in Black Girls, the second one, Critical Race Theory and Education, and the third, Critical Race Feminism and Education. So before talking about these 3 sections, I want to state what the author's purpose is behind this article. In the article, it is stating that the authors are arguing that Black girls have multiple realities and it is affecting their education throughout it. Now, what I have come to understand is that the authors are stating in the article is that there's an understanding for Black girls and realities, and that we as future teachers need to understand that. The second one is educate others on education for Black girls. We need to have a realization of what the education they are facing. And then the third one is more scholarships in the field of education for Black girls. We need to push for more scholarships for Black girls in education. So, to talk about why and how does this article relate to our past readings, to what we have been learning about? So this article is dealing with stereotyping and how society has formed. And what I keep talking about is all our past readings have been about social foundations, what our society has talked about in education, race, gender, class, ethnicity, religion. And what this paper is dealing with is about Black girls and how they face their challenges in education. So moving on, our first topic that we'll be discussing in the article is research with Black girls in mind. So what is being said is that America is stereotyping African American girls as loud, aggressive, and masculine. Researchers have been saying that the factors of this jeopardy that Black girls have to face in mainstream education is race, class, and gender. Now, researchers, Evans Winters, mentioned stressors that Black girls have to face. This history behind these factors is that there are families, communities, and schools. And without that support, research has said that students will strive and do amazing in education if they have support from families, communities, and schools. Now, moving on, they talk about all the different researchers in this section. There's a lot of researchers that are mentioned, and they state their opinions and their research that they have put into this. The first one is Fordham, and they are stating that America stereotypes African American girls, like I said, as loud, aggressive, and masculine. The second one, O'Connor, she mentions that African American girls embrace a positive Black female identity. The third one, Henry, she is stating that Black girls have dual personas that lead to resilience inside and outside of the classroom. And then the fourth, last but not least, Evans Winters, she is stating that many urban Black girls face stressors in their families, communities, and schools. Now, why are we talking about all of these researchers? What do we need to find from what they are saying? What I have found is that all these researchers are pushing for us to understand and state that there is a challenge that Black girls are facing in the education field, and that Black girls either embrace what is being thrown at them and they strive in the classroom, or it's always affecting them so much that they have to battle against it every single day. So moving on, the second section that we'll be talking about is critical race theory and education. Now, critical race theory, also known as CRT, I will mention. CRT has 5 tenets in this section, and the 5 tenets are stating, which I will read below. First one, race and racism are central in defining and explaining how the U.S. society functions. The second one, challenges dominant ideologies and claims race neutrality, objectivity, meritocracy, colorblindness, and equal opportunity. So before I move on to the third one, after reading that second tenet, had a kind of misunderstanding. I did not understand what meritocracy was, and I wanted to define that for you guys. Meritocracy is the government or the holding of power of people selected on the basis of their ability. So moving on from that second tent is the third one. Activist in nature and propagates a commitment to social justice. The fourth one is centers the experiences and voice of the marginalized and oppressed. And then the fifth one is necessarily interdisciplinary in scope and function. So all these five tentives are explaining that critical race theory and their implications for addressing that there's problems in education for Black girls. Moving on, we start discussing what are the purposes of critical race theory and critical race feminism. We might be sitting here and we don't have an understanding of it yet, but in the article it states the purposes, and there's two of them. The first one is practical and relevant implications for the study of African American females in schools' experiences. The second one is to begin to envision the possibilities of critical race feminism and education theoretical framework. Now, these are the purposes, and I think they're great for us to understand because this is what it's going to push through the article, what we need to have an understanding to realize what's going on. So with this section, we also talk about the history and the background. Now, we have a researcher, legal scholar Bell, and he starts mentioning Brown versus Board of Education, that case of 1954. And I'm sure we've all heard of it due to our classes that we've all taken for education. Now, what this case is talking about is the racial segregation in the classroom. And I did go ahead and add a picture on here, the map, before this case has actually taken place and what educational segregation in the U.S. kind of looked like. And those different colors on the chart will break it down for you. So what the researcher, legal scholar Bell, has been saying is that this case benefited interests of whites, but excluding and discriminating against Black citizens. And this case was a violation of the 14th Amendment and it needed to be fixed. But they were also stating that this was the beginning of the racial segregation and that we're kind of still facing a little bit of those effects now today for Black girls of education. So this section also goes into the environment for Black girls and how society has failed for women of color. The environment, Black girls outnumber the boys in classrooms, and that means that women of color are left to defend themselves in desegregated public, urban, and private school classrooms, and which leads to society failing to address the concerns of women of color and realizing that women of color have different experiences than white women and boys of color. They're not put through the same situations and experiences, and that we need to realize that as future teachers and as people of America. So the third and final thing we'll be talking about, this section in this article, is critical race feminism in education, also known as CRF. Now, CRF is a branch of CRT, critical race theory. And CRF provides legal and academic plans for studying race, class, and gender oppression in educational institutions. Now, this section in the article breaks down what it's talking about is feminism is biased against Black women, which I understood through this. It was measuring the standards off of white women, and what is happening is that they are basing all this research off of measuring standards of white women, which they are saying that the characteristics of white women and Black women are the same, which we all should understand that they are not. So the research is biased and they're not actually studying the Black girls in education. Also, I like to add in a lot about in this article, they were saying what Black girls face in schools, which I found extremely interesting and heartbreaking. One thing is that they are more likely to be reprimanded or praised for social behaviors. Also, teachers' expectations for Black girls are lower than what their expectations are for white girls. And then also, Black girls are 2 times more likely to repeat a grade, to be suspended, and be expelled. Now, one really sad thing about in this article is that it stated that Black girls have just realized that they have to adapt in order to survive. They need to adapt in this educational situation, this environment to survive and to move on, which I think is completely wrong in my opinion, because they need to stand up for their rights and realize that They do not need to be stereotyped or judged or formed to the social norms. Another thing I added on this slide that I thought was interesting was a chart. And basically what it's saying is the Department of Education suspension data for girls and boys. And in this chart, you can see right above there is that girls of color, black girls, are suspended 6 times more than white girls. So I would just take that and realize that this is affecting and challenging their schooling. So also in this section, critical race feminism education is impacting black girls, and these are their impacts. The first one is CRF reports that women of color's experiences are different from men of color and white women, and they need to realize that. Also, CRF focuses on their lives of women of color who face discrimination due to race, class, and even more. CRF also asserts identities and consequences of women of color. And moving on, CRF is multidisciplinary in scope and breadth. And then last but not least, CRF calls for theories and practices that simultaneously study and combat gender and racial oppression. Moving on from all of these sections that we have went over that I've discussed with you guys, I hope you have a better understanding. Like I said in the beginning, the conclusion based off of this is that black girls in education are stereotyped by society and they face challenges every day. Critical race feminism, they talk about the feminism and how that research has put on that white women and black women have similar characteristics, but in reality, we need to realize that they do have different similarities and that they do have different characteristics and experiences. And then also, we as future teachers need to realize that the realities of black girls and what they face in education inside and outside of the school system. So after reading this whole article, I had some critical questions and some thinking. After reading this article, my first question was, how can we help as future teachers of America to prevent stereotyping? What can we do to not let society stereotype our students based off of color, based off of ethnicity, off of gender, off of everything else in that world? What can we do? We need to put that in our mind as future teachers. What can we do to stop this? My second critical question for you guys is, what strategies can we use to educate our future students on equality? Our students are going to be the future of this world, and as teachers, we need to create their minds of equality and show that everybody is equal. Everybody has different struggles in this world, and one person should not be treated differently because of those factors. And then the third one is, how can we motivate our students to further their education and not let stressors get in the way, not let doubters, not let people of society let them get in the way of their education? And all of these critical questions are major because as future teachers, we need to protect our students and we need to push and strive for equality and a better understanding of everybody in this world. And after this presentation, I hope you guys realize that this article is huge and we need to have a better understanding of reality of black girls in education. And I hope you guys learned something from this presentation. Again, my name is Casey Cooper and thanks for listening to me, guys. Have a great week.